Just wanted to give you an update quickly on where we're at with the investigation for the fire at 1943 Junction Road on the 18th of this month. Autopsies were completed today. We have some preliminary results. Of course, the final results will take time for the medical examiner to complete, and their reports will be issued. So if you want autopsy reports, you'll have to do that through the medical examiner's office. I've handed you a timeline that we've been able to establish of the victim's activities during the day or part of that day. Also, that has their names and ages now that we've completed some of this investigation. There's still some work we'll be doing, but we have the basic facts now, we believe. So we'll quickly go through the timeline. So the victims, or the adult victims, are Ashton Brown. She was 26 years old. And Aschod Ewing-Meeks. He was 26 years old. They had 2 children together. They were also victims. That would be Bella Ewing-Meeks. She was 4 years old. Brixx Ewing-Meeks was 8 months old. On the 18th, they all entered the sheriff's office lobby at 12:11 p.m. They walked in, no calls were made. They spoke with our receptionist. They were very vague about what they wanted. They just wanted to talk to an officer. The receptionist tried to get information from them. She asked for an address or anything. They gave an address of Gwynn Street in the Mocksville city limits, which is actually Miss Brown's parents' address. At 12:15, they left the lobby. We'll play the video from the lobby for you here in just a minute so you can see what the interaction was. There was nothing out of the ordinary. They really wouldn't interact with the receptionist or tell her what they wanted. So the receptionist gave them a phone number if they wanted to speak with an officer, because they wouldn't wait. They left. So at 12:35, they left our lobby at 12:15, so they were here for 4 minutes. At 12:35, they called the Davie County 911 Communications Center. They talked to the telecommunicator, told them they wanted to speak with an officer, basically wanted that officer to call them. There was some back and forth. They really wouldn't say what they wanted. They had some safety concerns, they said. We'll play that call for you shortly. So an officer was dispatched to call them. An officer calls Miss Brown's cell phone at 12:46 from his cell phone. They talked for 32 seconds and the call dropped or ended. The officer calls her back at 12:47. They talked for 55 seconds and the call dropped or ended. The officer calls back at 12:49. They talked for 2 minutes and 8 seconds and the call drops or ended. The officer calls them back again at 12:54. They talked for 6 minutes and 22 seconds and the call drops or ends. The officer calls back at 1:06. The call goes to voicemail. The officer calls back at 1:07 and the call goes to a voicemail. The first initial call the officer made, Miss Brown answered. She talked very shortly. Then she made the statement to the effect that she was actually just calling for her boyfriend, and she handed the phone to her boyfriend, Mr. Meeks. The rest of the calls were with Mr. Meeks talking. He wouldn't really advise what he wanted. He advised the officer that he thought somebody was following him, but he wasn't in danger. They weren't threatening him. The officer attempted to get him to come back to the sheriff's office. They were driving around. They wouldn't tell the officer where they were. He attempted to get them to give a location to meet. They would not. Tried to get them to come back to the sheriff's office. They would not return to the sheriff's office. Could no longer make contact with them after that. At 2 o'clock, we have a witness that sees them at their residence at 1943 Junction Road. They're in the yard, some type of verbal disagreement or argument, according to the witness. He sees them go in the house, and he leaves his residence to go about his business. A passerby driving down Junction Road sees smoke from the house. They drive to the Cooleemee Fire Department and report that the house is on fire. So there's no call there. There's no 911 call for that. Cooleemee Fire Department tells communications they're responding. That occurred at 2:14 p.m. At 2:17, the fire department is on scene and beginning fire operations. Once they enter the house, they discover 4 deceased persons in the house. Officers are responding at that time to the scene. Detectives are en route within a few minutes after that. I think our first officer arrived at 2:30 or 2:38, I believe it was. That's not in the timeline, because after that, the fire ends the timeline of what the Browns were doing, or Mr. Meeks was doing. Search warrant was obtained once the fire was out. The SBI assisted with the search warrant. They conducted a fire investigation to determine the cause of the fire, and the cause of the bodies. We conducted several interviews with all the witnesses, the firemen. We put it together. All 4 victims are deceased from gunshot wounds. The fire was intentionally set. Mr. Meeks was deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and we found the gun that matches all of this actually still in Mr. Meeks's hand. I don't have any further information to release. That's the sum of it, and I'll be happy to take any questions.